All right, in this video, I will look at fallacies of reasoning related to cause and effect. If you thought fallacies of reasoning and logic are common in news stories, well, you ain't seen nothing till you look at causation. Cause and effect is a hopeless jumble in the media and out of the mouths of the geniuses we call our politicians. First, I will set out some basic principles. Then I'll run through a few recent news stories. I'll comment as we go and see if the journalists and the sources they refer to and cite and interview, whether they seem to have the slightest clue how little weight should be given to their conclusions, because they simply ignore actual or potential fallacies in causation. Most of us have heard the Latin phrase post hoc ergo propter hoc, which means simply after this, therefore, because of this. This is a logical fallacy left on its own. It's useful. Um, if we can take the trouble to rule out coincidences, you can make a strong argument still by building on the link of an actual a relationship between an event or condition and what follows. And simply and work from there. But you have to do a little bit more work, or it can result in the wrong conclusion. This rhetorical mode of just looking at what follows an event, you see it used a lot in history, chemistry, biology. But here's some other stuff you need to do. Be aware that there are many reasoning errors or logical fallacies associated with causal relationships. A few of the more common ones: ignoring multiple causes. I mean, do video games cause violent teens, or is there more to it than that? Why aren't all kids who watch violent TV or video games, why aren't they all violent? 2, mistaking chronology for causation. After this, therefore, because of this. 3, confusing causes with effects. Are bad street drugs a cause or an effect? And inept causal analysis. Now we'll just go to some of the basic stuff here. And here we go. These are my notes. There are several patterns often used to map out these connections. Single cause, a single effect. A single cause can lead to a single effect. For example, a radiator leak can cause the car to overheat. 2, a single cause, multiple effect, namely that one action has several ramifications. For example, that increased CO2 levels will cause just about everything. 3, multiple cause, single effect, that there are several reasons, usually with varying degrees of causation, for one result. For example, this is an old common law case. I leave a tree trunk on the road and the careless horseman rides into it. Or high unemployment, high interest rates, and high real estate costs, these are the causes, might lead to decreased real estate sales. That would be the effect. 4, a causal chain or a domino theory, this in which each effect becomes the cause for yet another effect. And if interrupted at any point, the chain is disrupted. For example, I am driving and I rear end one car that is pushed into another car and then another. The chain stops when one driver who has left a safe distance between his car and the car ahead does not hit that car. So you could see the domino theory also has political ramifications. If you believe in it, you might want to send troops to Vietnam, for example. All right, number 5, multiple cause, multiple effects. Several events or reasons cause some occurrence which has several results. For example, a government raises taxes too high or prints too much money, and these policies ripple out into society, stifling growth, raising the cost of goods, etc., etc. 6, alternative causes or effects and effects. The car won't start because the battery is dead. There's also no gas in the tank, and there's also faulty parts. So there's alternate causes. Now, in addition to these patterns, you should probably recognize that causes naturally fall into 3 categories. Necessary causes, which must be present for an event to occur, but may not be solely responsible for the event. There have to be illicit drugs and guns for there to be drug addicts and gun violence, but these inanimate objects are not solely responsible, arguably, although that won't be apparent in some of the news clips I play in a minute. 2, contributory causes, which help bring about events but can't produce effects independently. Hollywood and Netflix promote violence and the misuse and mishandling of firearms. In just about everything you see someone sticking a gun in someone's face, and these are the gun control people. But you also need an immoral population, arguably, with low impulse control or really dumb people who take these sources of information as instructions or instruction manuals for life rather than entertainment. 3, sufficient causes, which are all that is needed to cause an event. Be aware that most causes are either necessary or contributory. A sufficient cause of death can be stroke, heart attack, or strangulation, but there are other ways to die. That also comes up in the stories we're looking at. So I've looked at the fallacies of reasoning to start this, so I won't read it again. So first of all, let's have a look at a recent announcement by our glorious leader, Justin.
We're introducing legislation to implement a national freeze on handgun ownership. What this means is that it will no longer be possible to buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns anywhere in Canada. In other words, we're capping the market for handguns.
All right. Capping the market for handguns. First, this is apparently in response to an incident in the U.S. involving long guns. What were the causes of that incident? Mental health? Were those guns illegal? What exactly is the correlation between this event in another country involving a different type of gun and handguns? So is there any correlation to handguns at all? So that's the first question.
Liberals crack down on gun ownership, introducing Bill C-21, which includes a range of new restrictions on firearms in Canada, including the ability to revoke a license for someone involved in domestic violence or criminal harassment.
Okay, just as an aside, judges can already do those things, so why is this relevant causally at all? Why is this even part of this legislation?
Gun violence is a complex problem, but at the end of the day, the math is really quite simple. The fewer the guns in our communities, the safer everyone will be.
All right. When Trudeau does math, take note, okay? He seems really proud of his math, but his math is really on its face just nonsense. Is there a correlation between guns, the inanimate objects, and violence, guns and safety? He just announced a future freeze on the acquisition and transfer and even, I suppose, in inheritance of guns. This act, I have some information that suggests this announcement has led to the emptying of gun stores of handguns. Did violent crime just go up 1 billion%? Probably not. Then think about the freeze. Gun owners can't buy more guns. Okay, so the announcement doesn't decrease guns in society, but it would presumably almost inevitably result in fewer legal handguns. I mean, is the correlation Trudeau is so happy about between the amount of legal guns available to steal? Okay, now that's an interesting correlation. If there are no guns to steal, then there's no, hence, illegal guns to misuse. But what about the supply of illegal guns? Does a freeze reduce or increase illegal guns on the market? I mean, logically, if the point is to reduce the supply of stuff to steal, why not freeze the purchase and transfer of cars? Cars are stolen. If there are fewer cars to steal, then that would reduce crime. How about cap the purchase and transfer of jewelry or money? What if we own nothing? Then we'd be happy and safe because there would be nothing to steal. So I think this announcement by Trudeau is a good example of a political solution with a few causation problems. Now, let's look at the next clip.
Quite different than the graph for other provinces.
It's a dubious honor. British Columbia.
Just before we go further, this is on excess deaths. So we'll just start it over.
It's quite different than the graph for other provinces.
It's a dubious honor. British Columbia had more excess deaths during the first 19 months of the pandemic than other provinces, according to a new report in the Canadian Medical Association Journal.
There's a pretty large variation across provinces in the amount both of excess mortality and in the part of that seems to be explained by COVID.
Okay, stop there. Define excess deaths. What is an excess deaths? What are they using in their causation analysis? And also define seems to be explained by COVID. What about causes related to other things like the lockdown, mental health, suicide, loneliness, loss of employment, delayed cancer treatment, which I think the last one, delayed treatment, is the only thing they mention in this news, in quotes, article story.
From March 2020 to October 2021, BC had 10,000 excess deaths. Deaths above and beyond what would have been expected under normal circumstances, with COVID-19 directly accounting for only a portion of them.
Again, like, what's normal circumstances? What criteria are these people using?
Summer of 2021, we had a horrible heat wave, the heat dome, that we're now learning, after analyzing the situation, we're learning that 600 people died and 230 of those in a single day.
Okay. What caused this heat dome? There's nothing about that. It's just there, heat dome. And who are these people who died? Who are these people who died of heat? Now, I would bet that these weren't people living within multi-generational families. That's just a bet. People who live together where the younger people can keep an eye on the older people. I bet these are not the people who died in the heat dome. Fact is, and again, I have some sources for this, that these deaths are in fact the elderly living alone, the mentally ill, like hoarders, living alone. People are neglected, and we know all about care homes from the Quebec coroner's report. People are neglected and abandoned. So in the causation analysis here, where is the analysis of what causes vulnerable people to live alone or in shoddy care facilities? So I'm not sure what we're going to be able to make of this story.
And the ongoing toxic drug crisis in BC worsening during the pandemic.
We have 6 people per day that are dying from toxic drug supply.
Whoa, toxic drug supply. Cause and effect. Who takes toxic drugs, right? And why?
And that is going to account for probably 3,500 to 4,000 of those extra deaths. And it is completely saddening.
This comes as harm reduction teams in the province await a safe supply.
We don't have a problem with opiates. We have a problem with opiate prohibition, because the people that are dying are receiving their opiates through illegal markets, and they need to be receiving their opiates through legal markets, and then we would largely solve the problem.
When asked about the report, BC's health minister acknowledged there are multiple issues facing British Columbians, but said the province has weathered the pandemic better than other places.
The mortality rate from COVID-19 was the lowest here of any jurisdiction of its size in North America.
The report notes making comparisons between provinces is challenging due to a number of factors, but doctors believe BC will continue to see more deaths than expected in the years to come as climate change gets worse and COVID lingers.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. How did we get there? Like, how did we get to future excess deaths are going to be due primarily to climate change and COVID? How did we get there from this story? Okay, and I'll talk a little bit more about addiction in the next article, but how did we get there? Where did that come from? That is a tag on conclusion, very loosely connected to the story. I mean, what caused the heat dome? We still have the issue of what is expected or assumed to be a COVID death, and why future COVID deaths. Like, where's that dealt with in this story? And what about other causes of death? So I don't think we can give this story much weight. Let's try another one and see if they do a bit better.
Talk about her, without crying.
It's been 6 years now since Deb Bailey's daughter, Ola, died of an overdose. Her body was found in a Vancouver stairwell.
And she started to use heroin, and that was really it for her.
21-year-old Ola struggled with addiction for years. Bailey says the shame made it more dangerous. And the move to decriminalize small-scale possession is just a first step in the right direction.
You're using and you can hold a certain amount, and we move towards stopping shaming people for becoming addicted. That could be huge.
All right. This story, I should have mentioned, is on decriminalizing the possession of small amounts of drugs. And we're not talking pot, although it's probably included. So there's a lot to unpack in that first clip. Like, how about, is addiction a cause or is addiction an effect? If it's an effect, what are the causes of addiction? I mean, what about this unfortunate young lady? What were her particular circumstances? That's probably relevant to causation. Not only in her case, but generally. Were there mental health issues, for example? What was the family situation? They often bring out aggrieved relatives on the gun issue, addiction issues, but what they're saying really doesn't make a lot of causal sense. If we're going to be rigorous about it, not emotional. Why is shame a cause? She brought out shame. I mean, shame cannot be a cause because the shame occurred after the addiction and after the descent into really heavy drug use. So why is shame even relevant? Let's listen to the rest here.
Today, the federal government approved BC's request for an exemption from.
Oh, I should say this lady speaking right there, she was in charge of the Missing and Murdered Women's Commission that I think was given a budget of $92 million and didn't find any missing and didn't solve any of the murders. Anyway, let's go on.
The law criminalizing drug possession.
This time-limited exemption is the first of its kind in Canada, and with it comes great responsibility.
The 3-year trial starts in January. It will allow adults to carry up to 2.5 grams of drugs like illicit fentanyl, heroin, and cocaine.
It reflects our government's agreement that substance use is a public health issue, not a criminal one.
It's a move police in the province support, but say there are concerns that need to be addressed before it's implemented.
I have some concerns around public consumption, expanded online illicit sales of illicit drugs, motor vehicle related offenses of people using drugs in vehicles, impacts to youth and children
But advocates say these changes need to happen right now.
They talk about urgency, and yet it's 7 months down the road. That's another 1,300 people. Are you kidding me?
There are also concerns this does nothing to address safe supply or access to treatment. And politicians need to listen to people on the front lines.
The government should put more trust in us to come up with more solutions.
All in the battle against a crisis, killing on average 6 people a day in BC. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
Okay, so the politicians here really sum up what has been called the therapeutic approach to running a society, with the focus is entirely on diagnosis and treatment. But what about other causes? What about how the society is run by the government? I mean, is the society one in which is driving people nuts, making people unhappy, disconnected? What about moral causes for the underlying problem? What exactly is the correlation between addiction and the solution of carrying a small amount of drugs? Like, why is that causally relevant? I mean, it might be relevant as a palliative, but why is that? This guy at the end says, "Yeah, trust us, we'll solve everything." Somehow, I doubt that. I think he's being. I don't think he's really doing a good causation analysis here. This comes up at the end, I think, with the police officer, the commissioner, I think he was, or the chief of police, who seems to be, of all the people in the story, the most on the ball, but isn't calling the shots. He is raising a lot of questions that don't seem to be asked. There may be a reason to criminalize small amounts of drugs because someone who's addicted and may not be thinking straight is more likely to hide it and not leave it on a table for a kid to consume. So what are we going to see ODs of children going up because of this? Has anyone even thought about that? Well, he has. He raises a lot of questions that I think should have come up before the political solution. So there are a lot of assumptions packed into the policy if you're going to run a society therapeutically and not politically or using other factors. And I think, the failure of this policy and the inevitable failure of Mr. Trudeau's policy is rooted in the failure to do a proper causation analysis.